Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to part two of week 6 for the Future History Project. And apologies, first of all, that it's a bit late today. I've been suffering with sort of a head cold thingy this week, and it's really sending me for a loop. Normally it doesn't, but I think with COVID and everything and not sleeping, it just what has wiped me out. So my reading even this week has been affected, but we're getting back to normal. Fingers crossed. Knock on wood. And now we're with the last three stories this week, and they're three stories. Well, see, I'd not read them before, so I just want to say this to begin with. I'd not read them before. They're from, I don't have the nice hardcover, The Foundation's Friends, which was published in 1989 as a tribute to Isaac Asimov and a bunch of stories written by other authors in a tribute, I guess, yeah, to Isaac Asimov. And there's three that have been classed as Susan Calvin stories, so I tack those on to the end. And clearly, when you read well, we'll get into that in a second. The first one is called PAPPI by Sheila Finch. I don't recognize her name, to be honest. I may have read something else by her before, but I wasn't sure. Now, it's stretching it that this is a Susan Calvin story because she does appear very briefly uh, in it, and then the character gets a letter from her. So, yeah, it's stretching it, and it's an okay story, I guess. It's nothing special. It's definitely not Asimov. Um, well, I guess it's in tone, I guess, Asimov, but it just doesn't have any impact, at least for Susan Calvin. For me, anyway, it just doesn't have any impact. It's about a robot called PAPPI, and it's supposed to be a surrogate father for this boy, Timmy. But we start out in the future, rather, like he gets it when he's 8 years old in 2009, I think it is. And his mother works with Susan Calvin at U.S. Robots and Mechanical Men, and she is career orientated, but wanted a child. But the child, Timmy wants a father, so she gets this robot PAPPI. Um, and programs it and keeps reprogramming it. And eventually, the child grows up, leaves home, and goes to the moon to go to university. And he does geology. He meets a woman that he falls in love with. She falls in love with him, and they get married and have a child. She's from an extremely rich family, or at least her father is an entrepreneur, industrialist, super rich. He does not like the union because he's penniless, and basically he has disowned her to a certain extent, and only will bring her back into the fold if she leaves him. But they have a child, Beth, and but while he's off, I forget what he was doing, but he was away from home, and a meteorite hit the complex, and she was killed. The baby Beth was okay because she was in a creche nearby, and the habitat wasn't like everything sealed off quickly. But the emergency robots didn't get to her quick enough. His wife, so she died, and now we do have connections with not just Susan Calvin, but we have connections with uh, the earlier stories because we got Stephen Brierly shows up again. Now Tim and his daughter go back to Earth because it's sort of around the time that he finds out that his mother had died and he's been left this house. Um, well, apparently at the time, or it's just that he just left it. I'm not sure. It's a little hazy in the story, so there's some issues with that. Um, but he goes back to sort of liquidate it, sell it, and things like that, and get rid of the property. But his father-in-law, the rich industrialist, wants him to do a job, basically to go kill Stephen uh, Brierly, who is now mayor of New York. He is not yet the coordinator or sort of president of the earth that he becomes in the inevitable conflict. But he is sort of in between that from the can't remember the name of the story now, where Susan Calvin first meets him. Uh, Evidence, yeah, that was it. Evidence, I think it was, yeah. Uh, and he was just a district attorney at the time. Um, so it's an in between. So he had progressed to mayor, and Timothy decides that he will do this because otherwise, if he doesn't, his father-in-law will hunt him down. He'll get his goons to hunt him down and take Beth away. And but he does speak to Brierly, and he's going to meet him the next morning with in the park to go jogging to interview. Why someone out of the blue calls up and says, "I want to speak to you," and this guy and the mayor says, "Yeah, sure, come along." Again, issues with story, but anyway, okay. Suspend belief. So he does this, but at the same time in the house, he realizes that his mother had kept the robot PAPPI, and he finds it up in the attic, and sort of while he was, because there's big flashbacks through it of when he was a child and up into the teenager, and he didn't want the robot, but he became very attached to the robot, and uh, he sort of, all this flood of memories come back, and sort of, and then he decides he's not going to do what his father-in-law wants him to do. He's not gonna kill because they still saying that he's a robot, that Stephen Byerly is a robot, and it's dangerous, that if he has rights as a robot, then it's a slippery slope in essence. So he decides not to, and he decides to go on the lam basically, and go into the asteroids as a prospector, and take his daughter with him, even though he said he couldn't do that, but he decides to do that. And he introduces PAPPI to his daughter, and his daughter to PAPPI as her grandfather. So it's a bit strange, but also too, there's something like, there's in the story, and I'm sure, like, I just remembered it now, and I'm not sure if because like he didn't have a father, like she had artificial insemination to have Timothy, and she didn't want a man. But then it sounds like she does marry someone at some point, and then they move to Long Island or somewhere else. But then that all of a sudden is just dropped. So it's like, yeah, it's not that great of a story, I don't think. And because Susan Calvin is hardly in it, is minuscule. So is it really a Susan Calvin story? Well, and then we go on to the next one by Poul Anderson, which is a better story. That has its faults, but it's called Plato's Cave, and the essence of it is it's going back to sort of evidence the Powell and Donovan, because it is essentially a Powell and Donovan story, not Susan Calvin. Susan Calvin again shows up very briefly in a scene, and that's it. And then they take over. What's happened is that there's new minerals and found on Io, and there's robot crew that's specially designed to mine it, and it's got one sort of lead robot that is very smart and can make decisions on his own, and while he directs all the other his minions to do the mining. But what's happened is, and he's called Jack, Edgar, another robot that comes to pick up the ore and then takes it back, and he tells everybody that, well, Jack has, stopped working because he says a human has told him that there's a virus of some sort that's in the iron, that when it goes back to Earth, it'll infect all iron and metal and everything, and destroy and kill humans. Basically, it'll be really bad for them. And so he, is the three laws of robotics kick in, that he can't do harm to humans. So he's refused to work, but the humans can't really get really close to where he is because of radiation and everything. So they've got to remotely do this, but they send out Powell and Donovan on a little ship, um, and they land on another moon, and they start talking to Jack, and they find out that Jack is saying that a human has come to him through a visual aspect, that he's nearby in a ship, or not on one of the moons, but somewhere in a ship nearby. And he says his name is Emperor or Napoleon. So they think he's gone screwy. That this was a very expensive robot. It's a seventh prototype, so they went through a lot to get to him, and he's struggling with this because he sees Powell and Donovan, his human, on the screen, and they have a safety code that unlocks, and he has to obey. However, Napoleon had this as well, and told them that there'd be others being sent, but there'll be robots pretending to be humans, and the thing about saving humanity, outweighs everything else. But he is conflicted because he sees humans on there, and he's trying to struggle with this, but he hasn't had too much interaction with humans nor training regarding humans. So Powell and Donovan are trying to use logic to try to get around what he's been told, and the aspect of the three laws of robotics, so to get him back to work, because this was very costly. The government put everything into this as well, and what it turns out is a rival faction that wants to see the current government, a reform government, brought down. So they want to destroy this, so they can point and say, see, this was a waste of money, you've wasted taxpayers' money, blah, 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 blah. you know um and it's called Plato's Cave, and there's an interesting thing about this, because it's Plato's Cave. It's from Plato's thing, where you're in a cave and you see sort of shadows on the wall, and that's your interpretation of reality, and everybody's living within this Plato's Cave. So it harkens back to Reason, where Powell and Donovan were on the space station, when the robot saying that, there's a God, you're not the ones that created me, blah, blah, blah. And it's just a point of view in a sense. But this one is a little more, because, there's people that believe that the robots are bad. And it's kind of eerie how that works with today. And it's kind of prescient in a way to what is happening, not just in the United States, but in the world. Here in the UK, people are believing, like, like, they see stuff, but they interpret it in some other different way. You can show them something, but they say, oh no, well, that's not real. They'll believe something else, like they still believe that Donald Trump is president of the United States. There's a huge amount of people. So that's the kind of thing that they were, that's in this story, where if you're given enough things, that people believe things, and they believe their own way. But Powell and Donovan do figure out how to tweak and get the robot to listen to them and say that they are human. And then the same is for, because it was a robot that was sent out and pretending to be human, as Napoleon. So he also too is on their side now, and is contrite because he realizes that he's been duped. But But yeah, it's but there's an interesting there's several interesting things about this is that the robot that Jack says to them, well, I haven't, we like Powell and Donovan are saying, well, I see we don't look the same. We look very different, and basically Jack says, well, all humans look the same to me. And I thought that was a very good because he has no experience, so all humans look the same. I just thought that was fabulous. But anyway, the way that they do, I won't go into the details about how they work out uh, Jack's sort of conflicting things, emotions. Well, the conflicting laws. It doesn't quite hold up, I don't think, because they do it and then he explains it again in a sort of transmission back to Earth, and it just doesn't quite hold water for me. But anyway, but again, it's a Powell and Donovan story, not so much a Susan Calvin story. And then the last one we read here is The Fourth Law of Robotics by Harry Harrison. And this is where we get the stainless steel rat, Slippery Jim, that shows up because what happens is a robot robs a bank, and they're pretty sure it's a robot. Mike Donovan sees this and takes it to Dr. Calvin. Now there's an issue there. It's classed as a Susan Calvin story, but the Dr. Calvin, when he goes in, like, it's clear that he's sort of old. He's going bald and he's very gray. So this is late in his life, and he's Dr. Donovan. But when he goes into Dr. Calvin's office, there's a few weird things that are said here. It's like, he looks at her and he says, with her glasses off, Dr. Calvin's eyes were limpid pools of unfulfilled desire. Her figure, despite the lab gown, could not be disguised. And then he goes on, and she says to him, "Did you look at my great aunt in that steamy-eyed way, Dr. Donovan?" Great aunt. Okay. And then later, he says, where they're trying to figure out logically how this is the robot. And he says, one thing I said, I will. I said through tight-lipped teeth, like her namesake aunt, she was a giant of logic thought processes. So this is not Susan Calvin. But it's not said, but I don't think it's Susan Calvin. It's a weird story. I don't know, and it just doesn't work with the stainless steel rat. I don't think. I think it's like the Plato's Cave was the best out of the three, I think, but the stainless steel rat one isn't. And the fourth law of robotics, I won't spoil the story for you because it's a little weird. It harkens back to another one, the very first Powell and Donovan story, where only I think it is it Powell or is it Donovan that's in there? I'll just say it harkens back to the first law story, but in actual fact, it's not quite as good as the first law one because that was sort of a tall tale, and this one was sort of a real one. So anyway. So those were the last three short stories, as far as I know. There are other stories written about Susan Calvin, apparently, but they're more fan fiction. These were ones that were authorized by the Asimov estate. And next week, I will go into what we will read next week. But this ends the Susan Calvin stories, and we're now into novels. And I'll see you with that tomorrow. Take care, BookTube.